Hello YouTube, De-bodgery here. Welcome to EV Components Review. On the bench is the logic boards from two of the three logic boards I have from Rush controllers that are destroyed. So as you can see, this one says a 2 on it. This is the one that's out of the black Rush controller, which I haven't showed you otherwise. And the other logic board I'm going to show you has got a 1 on it. So the first thing I want to talk about here is repairs or evidence for repairs. And I've said that this logic board doesn't really show any, but it does have some. You can see this white flux on here. Clearly that connector has seen some hand soldering, and whoever it was is sloppy enough to get on here as well when they were doing that. But yeah, that connector has seen some hand soldering. I don't know if it just didn't get soldered down during the reflow process particularly well, but yeah, that's why you had that flux on there. Clearly not washed. And again, over here, you can see more of that same white flux, and those capacitors were hand soldered. You see it on this side of their legs as well. Obviously not washed. I'm going to call this white flux factory flux. And other colored flux I'm going to call KO Moto flux. Okay, so again, you can see, this is where all the scorching is. So there's a lot of residue on here that I can't deal with without solvents. But you can still see that this connector has been soldered in. In fact, you can see some of that white flux over in this area too. So clearly that connector was not soldered down particularly well in the reflow process, and somebody had to come along and touch it up. These legs right here and those ones, they show hand soldering work on them. In fact, like there, you can see a little bit of residue of the white flux in there, the factory flux, whereas this side down here looks like standard reflow soldering. So I would say that probably these two gate chips, probably reflow on these ends didn't work so well, so somebody manually touched them up after the fact. Again, this is probably all factory stuff. Yeah, these caps, you can see the same thing. They've got that white flux around them. Around this chip, you can see the same thing. So probably all that stuff, yeah, those jumpers, all that stuff got done at the factory. These boards were assembled to fix them. And like around the STM32F103, you can see that same white flux here. So this chip didn't get soldered down particularly well. And then there is some other kind of flux that's much darker over here. So this chip got placed, didn't quite work out, so somebody manually came through, soldered it, and then somebody else from someplace else, I'm going to call this KO Moto flux, touched it up again. So probably not repaired per se, just simply dodgy reflow soldering that is crap, and you have to do a lot of manual rework to get it all to be good. I've said this many times before that, KO does things the absolute cheapest way possible anywhere that they can. And if they can cut corners, they absolutely will. And then they bodge everything else. And sometimes that even costs them way more money to do so. But yeah, whoever's doing their assembly work for them, that reflow work, is sketchy. And that's why you have to do stuff like this, because well done reflow work that's done on a mass scale, the boards come out perfect. You don't have to come back and touch them again. They literally don't fail. The failure rates are like 0.001%. And so yeah, you don't have to come back and touch stuff up like you see all over this thing. Yeah, you don't have to inspect anything because they're going to work. You don't have to do any of this stuff. But this board has definitely gotten touch up on it. Let's look at the other side. All right, so, Christopher in his video, he claims, oh yeah, our boards are all washed, yada, yada, yada. Oh, really? So what is that exactly, Christopher? Again, it's that same white flux. So, that factory flux, that's definitely all right here. I'm going to call that not washed. In fact, if you look like on that pin right there, that one, the solder did not even flow to the pin. Yeah, this one is probably the worst of them. You can see a pretty good sized void between the pin and the solder. When I push on it, it doesn't move, so it's got solder on it sufficiently to hold it in place, but yeah, the solder joint's not great. And that one's got a void on it too. Yeah, you can see that one pretty good too. So yeah, this is all hand solder work right here. So the process, we'll flip it over again, for making these things is everything that's surface mount up here, and that's almost everything except for the capacitors and this connector, the buzzer, the Bluetooth module, and these guys right here. Pretty much everything else is all surface mounted. And so a solder mask is placed down. It's a very thin piece of stainless steel, and then solder paste is squeezed through it to just basically cover the places only where you want solder. Then robotically, all these parts are placed. That's run through a reflow oven that gets hot enough to melt all the solder. So all this stuff gets done very quickly, robotically, and as a result, you get very consistent results like this. Except for that, whoever it is that KO Moto uses is, well, sketchy, and their reflow process kind of sucks, which is why they've got to do touch-up work. So all that stuff is all done robotically. You know, basically a person doesn't have to touch it or shouldn't ever have to touch it, but obviously they do. Then, as a second step, after that's all done, then a person comes through and hand solders that in place, hand solders all these capacitors in place, and as a result, you can see all of that same white flux on here. So, yeah, they touch up some stuff in places like this, add a little bit of solder to a few places, but yeah, this is a person hand soldering all these capacitors in here, and you can see the white flux from that. That connector gets hand soldered. These two hulls for the two current sensors get hand soldered. This Bluetooth module, yeah, see all the white flux? This gets hand soldered in place. So that's all hand soldering done after the fact. And could all this stuff be done by machine? Yes, it could. But I would say that it's not really very compelling, especially not with like this Bluetooth module or these connectors on the bottom. If these connectors were on the top, if the Bluetooth module was on the top, like they ought to be, then you could use a process called wave soldering. Basically, you have a vat of molten solder, and you make a very, very consistent wave underneath the thing, and it just literally washes across the board, and everything gets a nice, consistent coating of solder on it. But, yeah, that would do all this stuff just like in a snap of the fingers. All of these capacitors would all solder down all in the snap of the fingers, but you can't have stuff like this. You can't have connectors on the bottom of the board because all that stuff will just get washed in solder, and well, you don't want that. You just want to have the ends of the pins, you know, all this stuff washed in solder. So yeah, this would lend itself to wave soldering if you didn't have these couple things on the bottom. And that would make every single solder joint on the bottom be super consistent because, again, it's all machine soldering. And it's very fast. But no, that's all manual. And it's expensive to do all this manual soldering. But, you know, hey, this stuff comes out of China. It's slave labor, sweatshop labor anyway. So, yeah, super good. Okay, let's look at, of course, again, I want to remind you, this is logic board number 2. That's the black controller. And there's not really evidence here of repair work. There's not. Just some touch-up work. So here, as you can see, this is the logic board that came in the gold controller. All I can say is, damn. That is 2 controllers, exact same failure mode. KO Moto, you need to get a handle on this, folks. Your Kapton tape did not solve any problems. So here, let's go grab that one again. Here's the Kapton tape. You can see the residual pieces of it. It's all under all these capacitors. And obviously, this logic board, sorry, bumped the camera. No Kapton tape. Obviously, none over here either. And yeah, the Kapton tape solved nothing because you didn't deal with the root problem. And that's basically that your battery plus bus is just swinging in the wind. There's nothing tying it down over here. And so it goes catastrophic. Arcing starts happening. And the Kapton tape doesn't stop that even slightly. So yes, catastrophic death occurs. Here you've got 2 logic boards with the exact same failure mode. All right, so evidences of repair. Everywhere? Yeah, I've already shown you the teardown of my Rush controller and all the repairs on it. And again, the soot adheres to the flux, which is why everything is black. despite the fact that I scrubbed this with a toothbrush and dish soap and been through the ultrasonic cleaner, because all this stuff went in together, got washed all together, etc., etc. But yeah, you can see the massive repairs. These gate chips, this op amp, all these little capacitors, all that stuff got replaced because, well, catastrophic death happened to this logic board that didn't blow it up like this. It was a different kind of death. You know, MOSFETs died and it took out all this electronics, and that's why they died. And you see the same thing over here. Massive repairs. That connector was obviously replaced. Gate drivers were all replaced. All these little protection diodes were all replaced. Over here we can see the same thing. Those caps got replaced. This buck chip got replaced. Replaced diode. Yeah, that diode probably got replaced as well. Yeah, the DC to DC power regulation section saw massive death as well. This Max 485 chip, that's been replaced on my controller. It's been replaced on my Pro controller. And here it is replaced on this one too. All these capacitors, all this stuff has been replaced. You can see all the flux around them because massive repair happened here. This chip here, same thing, got all the flux around it. That got replaced. Whatever this little MOSFET does, that died. Here's the CPU. Look at all the flux around it. That got replaced. In fact, you can see, like right there, where, you know, clearly somebody came in with a soldering iron and touched it up. That was not hot air placed. That was done by hand. You know, and all of that got replaced. Here is the driver MOSFET for the tweeter. That died. Here's a diode over by the Bluetooth module. That died. Yeah, massive repairs on this logic board. So 2 out of 3 logic boards that I have in my possession right now show massive evidence of complete replacement of everything that matters on them. All of this. So people don't listen to Chris for Kleinschmidt. He's just lying to you. This is 2 out of 2 or 2 out of 3 controllers that have had significant component failure on them, and they have had whoever their technician is at their little factory replace everything, massive repairs, and then sell it again as a fucking new controller. This is deeply offensive, Christopher Kleinschmidt. Nobody buy KO Moto stuff. Ban them. They are so unscrupulous, so dishonest, and they sell you shit like this. And then they hype the shit out of it and tell you how awesome it is. It's lies. It's bullshit. This is horrible. You should never, ever, ever accept a massively repaired controller as new. That's called a refurb. And you should call it that, and you should discount it massively, not sell it as new. All right, let's flip the board over. Look at the underside, because there's more evidence. So, again, you can see that clear flux, like you saw in the other one. Here, the whitish flux. So this is solder work that was done at the factory when this connector was put in. But you can also see that darker flux right here in a couple of places. That's because once KO Moto got the board, they touched up some solder joints on here. And so that's their darker flux on those. And obviously, that's not washed. So, another one of Christopher's lies debunked. The evidence is right there before your eyes, folks. Does that look washed to you in any way, shape, or form? It sure as hell doesn't to me. Yeah, and again, this board has seen no solvents from me. It has only seen dish soap and ultrasonic cleaning. All right, so let's look down here. Again, look at all the flux all over everything. Again, it's that white stuff. So call this the factory flux. But that's obviously not washed in any way at all. Yeah. Yeah, and you can see it around that connector. Here's some more of that white flux. So that was soldered, and the board was not washed. Yeah. Not washed. Not washed. Not washed. In case anybody's wondering, I haven't said not washed yet. Yeah, look at the burns through here. Look at the melted copper. Yeah, that's little copper blobs on there. This is all electrical arcing. Yeah, the catastrophic failure that happens here is just absolutely epic. All right. Yeah, again, here you got that same dark flux on here. These were both these hulls, because here's your 2 current sensors. Those both got replaced because they died when this board died the first time around, and then they repaired it, and those were bad too, so they had to replace them. And the Bluetooth module, look at that. I mean, I could shit on this thing and have it be cleaner. I mean, come on, KO Moto. Really, this is as good as it gets? Geez. Obviously, the Bluetooth module died. They unsoldered the blown one and replaced it with another one, and just left everything as filthy as can be. Didn't wash a damn thing. How much more evidence, 2 boards in a row, do you need of massive repairs on the logic board? How much evidence do you need? It's everywhere. That is massive repairs on this logic board. That's massive repairs. That is massive repairs. That's massive repairs on this logic board. 2 out of 2 Rush logic boards that I have in my possession have evidence of massive repairs. And a third one, which does not. It's got some touch-up work because there's sketchy work from the factory, but 2 out of 2 massive repairs. So, again, Christopher Kleinschmidt, you are a liar. People do not buy KO Moto products. This is what you're getting. Repaired stuff as new. Crappy designs, shitty designs, sold to you and hyped up to high heaven as if they're the best thing ever, and it's all bullshit.